Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. I have the great pleasure in my life of actually having of wonderful, intelligent women, actually, who are interested in learning appraising. And I have with me one of these beautiful, intelligent women who is in the process of learning the art and science of appraising, and that's Brigette Ginter. And Bridget has quite a background, and I'm thrilled to say that if you are a listener to this program, you heard Bridget take over for me interviewing Amada Cruz, the director of the Santa Barbara Museum of Art, about the French exhibit coming actually this year. And Bridget did a wonderful job. And I thought, well, I'd love to have her just talk to me about some of the things. Is every 2 months or so, Richard and I plan to do, or have planned to do for almost 20 years now, précis, synopsis of what's happening in the art world, what's happening, as far as the currents in the art world. And so what I did was I asked Bridget to take a look at all of the articles that I myself wanted to read desperately, and she read them for me. And so just a little bit about her background though. She lives here in Santa Barbara. She was educated actually in many places. She's a Francophile, which is why I thought of her to do the interview with Ahmad about the French show coming up. But she also has training at one of my favorite institutions in the world, the Courthold in London. She has her master's from the Courthold, and she's also adjunct professor, and she's been teaching art history and art theory, et cetera, throughout the years. And she said to me well, actually, it was about a year and a half ago. Do you think that with my background, I'd be suitable appraiser? And she's been helping me with some of the Richard, you should know, she's been helping me with some of the really gnarly issues around fire loss. And so when we first started to work on this major estate in the Palisades that was burnt, Bridget and I kind of put our heads together, and she helped me kind of brainstorm about what the attorneys were going to be asking for. And it's major. I mean, I don't think the art world has experienced the kind of losses that they've experienced or we've experienced up to this date with the combination of the Palisades and the Eaton fire, and of course, all of our fires. And the art world is reeling from that because basically, the jury is out. And I'd love to hear Bridget's thoughts on this, but right now, Bridget, what we're doing with that estate that you're helping me with, right now, we're trying to figure loss of value. So, as you know, what that means is, okay, the works are valued at such and such a figure. That's their fair market value as far as what they would make if they sold. Now, they've been through a fire. And the issue is because the fire losses are so vast and great and in general differing magnitude. So you have from anywhere between total loss being the apex, all the way down to involved in the char, soot, and smoke and exposed to minimal heat, but rained upon by char, soot, and smoke. So you have the general, I guess, trajectory
Right.
from total loss to loss by soot
Right.
damage, smoke
Yeah.
damage. So where does that put the sliding scale in terms of loss of value? In other words, obviously, if something's a total loss, it's a total loss. But let's say it's a partial loss, and a good restorer slash conservator can handle it and can bring it back to a certain serviceable quality. There's other things at play, which is has to do with more the philosophy of the work. In other words, is it truly the same work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Uh,
that, yeah, that's what's so interesting about all these pieces, and especially like you had mentioned that a lot of these works are more contemporary, which is yet another twist because in some ways, art is irreplaceable. There's only one, and once you lose that one, it can never be created again in exactly the same way. So it's sort of this conundrum of how we even define art. And I know there's, different contemporary artists that now the art world, like you mentioned, the art world has changed so much and it keeps changing. And that's why it's nice that you are wanting to do a show like this that sort of discusses contemporary issues and what's happening, et cetera. I think that's really important, and it's nice to bring that to the public. So
So the first thing I want to mention is a lot of clients have said to me that, because they've found out that I'm doing some work in the Palisades and Eaton Fire, and I've done so much work in Malibu over the years. Also, I've worked in our mudslide issues, worked in the fire issues here in Santa Barbara, but also I did, oh gosh, I don't know how many trips up to Paradise, California
right.
for the campfire. And I saw that's a whole socioeconomic difference in class. So you got the Malibu and the Palisades, and you've got, on the other hand, the people that live up in Paradise or did live up in Paradise and lost so much.
Right.
And so you've got this perception, and I've heard from various clients from Palisades and from the campfire, and I just want to throw this out there in our discussion. They say, well, these losses benefit the wealthy collectors because the wealthy collectors have the muscle to hire the attorneys, to get the forensic conservators out, to get the restoration people out. They've got that kind
Exactly.
of money to get that kind of, you know, proof of loss.
Right.
Whereas your folks that lived up, up, now I'm not saying that they didn't have money, but they were different type of people. They were mostly people that did, most of my clients were people that were in construction, for example, or they moved up to the Paradise area to be off the grid. So they
Right.
were
Yeah.
kind of off the grid folks. They were, artists that were really counterculture artists. One was a collector, massive collector of Grateful Dead memorabilia. It's
Wow. Well,
different kind of collector altogether. And so their issue was we they actually formed a class action matter
oh,
because the individual collectors couldn't afford what the people in Palisades can afford.
right. Right. And I was what you said made me think about just in the Pasadena fires, there were actually so many artists themselves that got impacted. And when you think about it, I mean, what is this about? Art can't be created without the artist, and the artist is the person that we think of as the creative mind, the person, like you said, kind of off the grid, thinking differently. So, so many artists were impacted by those pieces, and that's their livelihood. They will never get those works of art back, and they are many of them were not insured in any ways because they're not either they were unfinished or they weren't accounted for. They hadn't been sold yet. They were just in the artist's garage or what have you. So there's really no way of even placing a value upon it, which is so tragic. So
Okay,
that's
so I did two Santa Barbara artists that were up there in in the Thomas Fire, and they
right.
lost everything. They lost their inventory. One was a very senior artist. One had been working, he was, I don't know, 70s, late 70s. He'd been working all his life, very active, and had done a lot of easel work, but had also done a lot of installation work, mural work, architectural decoration kind of work. but
Right.
that work was now being starting to be collected. And so, that and this was a court case. And so I was expert witness in the case, and I had to make a evaluation of everything in this huge. He had two, the kind of storage facilities that are the back end of trucks, Bridget, he
Right.
had two of those on his property, on his ranch that were totally lost. That was his inventory, not only his inventory, but all of his archives.
Right.
So we had two separate valuation categories. One was the archive work, and the other one was the inventory work because he was working towards a show. And the show was to be a combined new work and old work as together. So it was really challenging because what I did with that was I thought about the classic art analysis, which is how much you do it's math. You do a computation. So as far as the mural work, the kind of murals that he was doing, he would sell for X.
Right.
If there was a commission mural, the mural was commissioned, but if the property was knocked down, the mural would sell for X. And we had track record about what things sold for. Okay, that's fine and good. But the court dismissed my idea, and I think they were right, actually, looking back, but this dismissed my idea to do an analysis of cost paid per square inch.
Hmm.
They said, no, we're going to disallow that. We don't think you should do a cost per square inch, and then, we're going to think about our remuneration should be based on that square inch. They said no, because exactly what you said, that the art is unique, and therefore you can't say this mural, which was, let's say, and this was the truth, about California history,
Right.
was more valuable in the location where it was mounted because it was about that local area's history
Right.
versus some Hawaiian foliage and fauna that somebody commissioned for their beach house.
Yeah. That,
So that was so the court said, no, um, Stewart, we're not going to allow that. Come back with another approach. So that was one thing. The other thing I want to mention, and I know that Bridget, you picked some good topics today for us to talk about, but I want to mention two things. Why this program is important, I think, is because I want to direct everybody to this. It's called the Object ID. And I want everybody that has any collections at all, whether it be art or furniture, clocks, coins, Grateful Dead ticket stubs, whatever it is you collect, take a look at the Getty Object ID categories. And that's super important because it gives a guideline of exactly how to categorize your art so that if there's a loss or a theft, even if there's fire damage or theft or anything else, I don't care if it's art, if it's furniture, if it's silver, if it's ceramics, etc. It's crucial that you go through this description list. And I urge everybody out there, if you've got a free Saturday, a free weekend, look up the J. Paul Getty Trust's Object ID checklist. It's a standard. It was formulated, Bridget, in 1993, and people in the museum world have been using it ever since. But now, since the devastating fire losses, especially in the Palisades and the Getty being so close and impacted as
right.
well. They've promulgated this J. Paul Getty Trust Object ID yet again. What is it? Well, it's a checklist. You write down what type of object you're looking at. What is it? Is it a piece of furniture? Is it a piece of sculpture? Is it a work? What is it? Silver, etc. Of what material is the object made? Is it plastics, metal, da da da? These are easy questions.
Right.
What are the inscriptions? Is it like in so many cases, Bridget, like you're talking about, is the text the art?
Right.
Okay, well, those are the inscriptions. Is it signed? Where is it signed? And importantly, a lot of collectors do some kind of inscription themselves, whether it be like on the back of something, such and such, I love you, here's your birthday present, or they countersign it with maybe the insurance um, number, their
Right.
policy number. They somehow they document something about the work of art, so they personalize it in some way. So, what kind of markings are there on there? What are the distinguishing features? What are the physical characteristics? This is the main thing that all of the valuation focus revolves around, the distinguishing features. Because, Bridget, let me just tell you this. Once something's been through the fire, the distinguishing feature is that it's been through the fire.
Right. Yeah.
And so that has impact on valuation, whether or not it was through the fire and half burnt, or whether it was close to the fire, or whether it was subject to the smoke and soot. It doesn't matter what the severity is up to a point, and then it does.
Right.
But the perception of it having been through the fire is as follows. Okay, Bridget, I'm going to offer you your namesake's Blue Warhol, right?
Yeah.
Brigitte Bardot and by Warhol, and there's
I
only one.
I
I
love
think
that
there's
word. Yeah.
yes, and one of our clients, Bridget, my one of our clients has that particular work. There's only one in blue, and well, in a certain type of blue, I should say.
Mhm.
And so there's only one, and one of our clients owns a certain piece in this series. And if you think about it, even the fact that it's been through the fires makes it suspect. So if I say to Bridget, okay, you just inherited $30 million, Bridget. Would you like to buy this Warhol? This one's been through the fire and this one hasn't.
Right.
Now you
Yeah,
don't have to
want
say,
the one that hasn't been through the fire.
you don't
Exactly.
even have to say, oh,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, so tell me what the damages were. You don't need to even say that. You automatically will think, no matter what, we
Right.
don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what kind of chemicals were involved. I mean, I'm no scientist, but I can tell you that I'd prefer to have something in my home, in my collection, for example, that has no taint of any kind of.
Right. But I think the other part of that too is, Warhol was such a prolific artist that made multiple renditions in slightly varying ways. So you sort of have a certain amount of choice. It's not like, I don't know, a comparison like
Yes.
one, it's not a one off. It's not a Picasso Demoiselles d'Avignon or something like that. It's like
Yeah.
it's there's some very, you have some choice. So I think that's what's interesting about the contemporary art conundrum in general is there's rarity, but I don't know exactly where I'm getting at. I think just the
No,
market.
I understand. So,
Yeah,
let me put a fine point on it. So, the it's called market tolerance. So, the market tolerance is affected by perceived damage. What the market will tolerate is
right,
affected by perceived damage. Okay, it's also affected by real damage, but
right.
it can be affected by perceived damage, as you're talking about. But
Well,
the rarity is important because, as you say, so many contemporary pieces now are in multiple editions, or by nature of their concept, they're made in kind of a mass
right.
produced. Yeah.
Well, and another instance that I want to mention that's like a little different but similar is say, I also have a background in the history of costume and textiles. So um, the perceived, say, if there's a Dior dress that was worn by, say, Princess Diana, the exact same dress, even though it's a designer dress, if it's being sold, it would be more. someone would want it because Princess Diana wore it versus even if the cost of the dress is $5,000 or someone else will buy it. It's the history behind it, like you said,
Provenance.
the provenance behind it and the idea that sometimes the story makes it more important.
Yes. So basically, so we're continuing on with the object ID, but I wanted to say everybody that's listening that has any kind of collection based on any kind of material, I don't care if it's furniture, if it's porcelain, if it's silver, if it's fine art, this object ID process, you can go online and take a look at the J. Paul Getty Trust Object ID standards. And a lot of the court work that say, well, okay, people are saying, okay, I've lost these things and the insurance is really, driving me crazy. They're not paying me what I was insured for. Well, they're going to ask in court, they're going to ask, can we see that descriptive list?
Right.
They're also going to ask for photographs, but they also want to see as much as they can of what the client describes the piece as, because it goes both to what the loss was and it goes to the personal loss.
Right. Yeah.
So, object ID, everybody, and okay, Bridget brought up something interesting, which is this market tolerance. So, once an object is restored, let's say it's restored and there's multiples. In other words, it's a print and it's one of 100, and now it's restored. So, what kind of loss of value is it once it's restored? And they're really, because it's contemporary work, there's not a lot of records of what a damaged work sold for. Now there will be going forward because of the Palisades. There
Right.
will be records, but in the past, I mean, there wasn't ever this devastating kind of loss. So we don't have a history of what these things sold for. Quality and quantity matters, though, as Bridget was saying. So if you've got a work of art that's got 100 copies and you can buy another one, yeah, the loss of value is actually it's going to be greater. Your loss of value is going to be greater for the object that's been restored because it's an easy purchase. It's easy for the market to say, yeah, I've got another one. Here you go. And it's not been through the fire. So that's one of the things we were talking about, Bridget, on the object ID, this distinguishing feature part, defects,
Right.
scratches, stains, drips, surface texture, the owner's personal markings, the degree and quality of restoration, degree of conservation, kind of framing, kind of UV protection,
Mhm.
uh, uh, breakage as far as, ceramics are concerned, repairs as far as fine furniture is concerned, reweavings,
Right.
fine textiles, reweavings as far as uh, your rugs and some of the couture is concerned. Big thing was the couture in the Palisades fire too, Bridget. So many of these people that were affected, they had very high end couture that was one of a kind that was made for them.
Right. Yeah.
And so the issue is, what were they insured for? Okay, you may ask, well, what were they insured for? Were they insured for replacement value? New? So the Dior, you go and you'd say, I want a custom Dior today. It's going to be 28, 30 thou. But if you went to resell that Dior, and let's say it's 10 years old, you're not talking that much money.
Right.
So what are you insured for? Textiles are a big problem. Yeah.
And
Maker. Who's the maker? Is it truly the maker?
right.
Is it,
Like,
is it purple label? Is it red? I mean, it's like Ralph Lauren purple label is the top of the heap with that. So,
well, even like
what,
a designer like Alexander McQueen, who's now passed, but his label lives on, and anything that was actually him is, valued different because there is no more.
yeah. But then again, it's like the value is the difference between what it would cost to actually have you hire his studio to do another McQueen,
Right.
or the value of that piece had it been sold in a public auction.
Right.
So, what are you insured for? That's an important thing to think about. So, maker, and then as Bridget was saying, a really important thing right now is the intent of the maker. She was mentioning some friends that had lost all of their own personal art because they were artists, and they lost their art in the Eaton fire. Okay, so what happens when an artist loses their inventory, their art? What do you think? What do you think happens, Bridget? And I'll tell you what I think should happen or does happen. They're two separate things, should and does happen, actually. But what do you think happens?
What do I think happens?
Yeah, when an artist loses their inventory to a fire.
Well, I think generally if they have some in insurance, it's probably sort of vague in terms of how they would, because it hasn't sold yet, none of their works would have sold yet. So it would have maybe gone under, I don't know, kind of look at the history of how much some of their paintings have sold and maybe get a general idea and then get a general lump sum submission from insurance company. But I'm
Okay,
not quite sure what if the artist has no insurance? I don't know exactly what happens with that. Maybe it would go under a homeowner's insurance policy. Maybe you'd get a little. I don't know.
Okay, so good questions, good questions. Number one is the insurance company should actually do a test. If they agree to insure an artist's collection, they're going to want to have, if it's going to be outside of the homeowner's policy. So the homeowner's policy is a blanket policy. It says we're going to repatriate you 20,000 for art, 12,000 for, say, silver. They have categories, the limits. That's the homeowner's part. Then there's the scheduled part. And so most artists that are pretty savvy are going to have a separate schedule. They're going to actually hire somebody like you and I to write an appraisal of their artwork. And how we do that is we look to see what things have sold for in the past,
Right.
like you said. And then that is a schedule. But see, the thing is with California insurers now, what they're doing is saying, yeah, that's all very fine and well and good. You've got a separate schedule. And you have these, you had your own pieces insured for, say, 60,000 for the whole collection. Now prove it.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
so
then
the
they
issue is, well, you say, well, I don't have to prove it. I have an appraisal. And they say, well, yeah, but that was, a while back. So now prove it. We want to see the proof now. And so they try as much as they can to not acknowledge that insured value, even though it's a separate schedule. So that's why this something like this object ID and also photographs are so important. I want to also mention a really interesting concept that Bridget, you brought up, but you didn't put a name to it yet. And Richard, I want to talk about the Visual Artists' Rights Act. That impacts on value. Bridget brought it up, but she didn't name it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what the Visual Artists' Rights Act is and how that impacts on value once things are lost or damaged or restored. Richard's giving us a sign. You see, he's got to go to quick break, Bridget. So when we get back, I want to tell you a little bit about your actual example of how an artist recovers their work if it's been damaged. One of these really important new topics in court is this Visual Artists' Rights Act. It's not a new act, but how it's being brought to play in the new losses is fairly new. So anyway, Richard, let's go to quick break and then very interesting discussion with I won't say intern. She's not an intern. She's colleague at this point, Brigette Ginter in training to be an appraiser, and she's going to be a great one. And she's been helping me with some of my cases and some of my clients. And also, what's been super is that she's got a background, a graduate background in art history from the best of the best. And so she's able to think up through some very important concepts that are new concepts.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, and they're new concepts to the art world now because we've had to face these things because we've actually been forced to, mainly because, like Bridget, you were going through it with me, these high level attorneys that are trained in how to destroy an argument. So,
Right.
we're really having to be trained in some of the latest cases. And let's talk when we get back from the break. We'll have a quick 5 minutes. I want to talk about the Visual Artists' Rights Act, and then I want to talk about some of the new things that are happening in the art world. Bridget's been researching for our hour today some of the really new cases that have come up and really new happenings and scandals that have come up. So anyway, don't turn that down. Back in a minute. We're talking about the state of the art world now that we've had these losses, and as we are talking now, we're having a fire in Santa Maria.
Right.
How many? Yeah, I mean, Richard, how many acres is that now?
Up to about 43,000 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even this very minute we're talking about this, and here we have another devastating California fire happening,
Yeah.
and that was close on the heels of the Madre fire.
Yeah.
So things are not getting any better. Okay, don't turn that down. Back in a minute.
Three, two, one. You're live.
So this is Elizabeth Stewart, and I have the great pleasure of talking with Brigette Ginter, who is a colleague of mine in the appraisal world and is training to be a master appraiser. And it's been super interesting. We're talking right now about some of the fire losses and some of the issues in the art world today. And Bridget actually gave me an example of some friends of hers, a couple of friends up in the Eaton fires in the Pasadena area. They're artists and they've lost their inventory. How do they get recompensated? And the issue is, are they insured and for what are they insured? And then also, did they have a separate schedule for their fine art? And I mentioned to Bridget, is she aware of the Visual Arts Rights Act? That's a big important thing in the art world today. What is it? Well, it says that an artist can disavow any kind of tampering, and tampering is the wrong word, but any kind of other hands
Right.
on their works. So let's say, you're a collector and you've been through the Palisades fire. You say, well, what difference does it make? I'm just going to have this conserved and restored, and the conservator is going to probably clean it really well and use some chemicals, and the conservator might take off maybe a glazing, maybe a varnish, maybe they're going to do some overpainting. Maybe they're going to cut the margins because they've been sizzled and this or that. Well, the artist can come back and say, that's not my work now. When they say that, that work is not the value that that artist achieves.
That's interesting. I'm just reading at some of the history of the the act and sort of different ways it's come up in the art world. And I was seeing an example with a Richard Serra sculpture that was removed from public display. And I'm seeing a couple of other interesting examples. I didn't know a lot about this particular act. I feel like there was another artist that I probably, and it's probably someone like Banksy where it came up with, just because when you have a lot of like more public art, public sculptures, or graffiti art per se, that it would come up for.
Totally, I know what you're talking about, and that was a case that involved, and it actually there was some fallout here in Santa Barbara. So, is a building, kind of half derelict building. and
Right.
that's in New York City. And they say, okay, it's no great shakes anyway. Basically, we got a lot of squatters here. We have a lot of artists, that are living here. We're going to get a bunch of our friends together, and we're going to paint the exterior. The landlord doesn't care. The
Right.
landlord's like, okay, go ahead, paint the exterior. And all of a sudden, there's artists that have risen along the art world trajectory like wildfire. They
Huh.
were the people that painted the exterior of that building. And then the landlord says, oh, gee, that the area is being gentrified. And I think that what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna either paint the artists that I don't like. I'm gonna paint them away, and the artists that I do like, I'm gonna have them chipped off the side, and I'm gonna sell them. It's my building. I can do that. Well, no, you can't. Basically, it's the visual. And the artists collectively took this guy to court, who was a big kind of landowner in New York, and said, no, it's not. First of all, you can't sell our art because it's not
Right.
ours. We disavow that it's ours. Yeah, and secondly, you can't overpaint it because, you gave us permission in the first place to do it. You can't overpaint. You've got to think of another way to preserve this, and it was a huge, and that was kind of the beginning of the conflict between the courts and the Visual
And
Artists' Rights Act. That
right.
was years and years ago, but you're absolutely right, Bridget. The history of it is interesting. But now what's happening is because people are thinking, well, it's not a big deal. I'll just restore this work.
Right. And I think that's why, well, to kind of segue, but also to kind of keep on this topic, there's a lot of contemporary issues right now coming up in regards to ethics and restitution in the art world.
Talk a
And
little bit more about that.
well, most recently there's been a couple of different court cases regarding restitution. A lot of museums are being faced with sort of pushback from different works of art that were taken without authority to do
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah.
during the era of colonialism. So, most recently, France's government discussed a bill that would streamline the process of returning artifacts looted from former colonies when they were under imperial rule. A lot of them were African countries. And they're still kind of debating how they're going to do it. But under the current law, the return of each item in France's extensive national collection would be voted on individually. They've already returned some objects to various African countries. But, well, going back even like when you talk about, I mentioned earlier in the episode, Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which was inspired by African masks that he had seen in Paris. So those masks were taken somehow from their native country and then inspired Picasso. So you have all these works of art that are in different countries that are not their country of origin. And how do you begin to make it right? And that's how you get into all these issues of ethics. What's the right way to make it right, and what's the wrong way to make it right? And in our own country, we have sort of different countries have been taking different stances. When you look at like the UK, the British Museum is pretty steadfast that they want to keep, for those art people know, the Parthenon marbles that are in
You're right.
originated in Greece and now are sort of part of this colonial experience in London. So there's that example. But then even in our own country, we have, even though we're not as old as other European countries, we still have our own issues, and a lot of them have to do with works of art that have ended up in various American museums that were stolen by Nazis from Holocaust victims. And
Right.
our government has a bill that's up in the next year or so, I believe, that is trying to place a statute of limitations on how long someone has to prove and try to get back their work of art that was um, misappropriated during the Nazi regime. And there's kind of this conflict between them and museums that want to keep those works of art. So this is sort of a major ethical problem in the art world right now. How do you make it right? And there was a book recently that came out, the moral, it's Towards the Ethical Art Museum, and it's written by Gareth Harris, and it's trying to figure out all these ethical issues behind these works of art. And, art is for the public, but art, just from our conversation, is so personal. So it's museums try to bring art to the public, but art is also something that belongs, in some cases, to various individuals that have great meaning. So how do you decipher that?
Right. Right.
That was a
So
lot.
Richard,
Sorry.
no, that's great. No, Richard's giving us a sign we got to go to a quick break. And then Richard, we have a few minutes to talk a little bit um, more about some of the interesting stories that Bridget's been uncovering in the art world. So let's go to a quick break. Be back in a sec. So this is Elizabeth Stewart, and I have the great honor and pleasure of speaking to Brigette Ginter, who's a colleague of mine, and we're talking about some of the interesting happenings in the art world that are kind of triggered by some of the huge losses that we're experiencing in, not only fine art, but furniture and rugs and textiles and couture and all the things that have been lost in California due to the fires and all the fallout of that. And Bridget's been following some interesting stories about, museums repatriating cultural material culture, objects of material culture. What else interests you? Very quickly, Bridget, we don't have too much time left, but what other stories really interested you?
Um, well, I also found interesting this whole story that you had sent me that really kind of had a Great Gatsby kind of vibe to me, of the philanthropist that was
Oh,
in high society New York that was posing as wealthy and donating large sums of money, especially to one of my favorite museums in New York, the Frick Collection. I love that museum. And he sort of hoodwinked a bunch of people, pretending that he was independently wealthy and would invite large parties to the Met, and had all these kinds of high profile supposed relationships. And he was found dead just a while back. And I don't think they've necessarily found the cause of death yet. But when I read that, like I said, I kind of thought Great Gatsby to me, this kind of illusion of wealth. And I think that just makes me think too about how the art world is sort of this strange conglomeration of wealth, but often artists start dirt poor. And it's sort of this very a world that is in a lot of ways trying to reckon a lot of issues within our society of just disparity. And yeah, and how we all can kind of fall into this trap of feeling like we need to appear a certain way in order to be accepted.
Right. And so this is the story of our modern art world. I always find it interesting because I love also couture, and every year I tune in and look at the red carpet, the Met Gala, and I'm
Right.
thinking, well, here's the Metropolitan Museum of Art. A good 7/8 of those artists on the wall would just gag if they knew the kind of money that was floating down in those clothes, because they
Exactly.
never had that kind of money in their career and they never made that kind of money selling their art. And yet this is the ground floor of philanthropy for the Met itself is the money that they achieve from these hugely wealthy people that are, invited. Anna Winter invites them to come and march down the aisle, and they have to give X number of dollars, to support the Met to do so. It's a very peculiar way of handling the cultural life of a nation. And more about that later, I guess, Richard, as we go forward with this new situation with Trump firing people from our art institutions, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's another story for another day. I thank you, Bridget, for being with us and for offering some really interesting stories. I love that one about the Playboy who decided he actually was Soros money. He's
Yes, I
yeah.
know. Like, yes, yeah, and it's crazy. I honestly don't know how it took so long for people to kind of slowly figure out that it wasn't his money. Um,
Well, a lot of it is because it's perception. This is the whole thing.
right.
It's that what you perceive is what you believe, especially when it comes to if you and I are trained to look at two-dimensional and three-dimensional works of art, and actually we're seeing them as more than some material which is called oil on a piece of fabric.
Right.
And that's an illusion too. I mean, so, the
Exactly.
it's illusion on top of illusion that basically all right, enough about that. Richard, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Richard.
You are very welcome. Thank you. And Elizabeth, will see you on Thursday, right? Same, mark
Yeah,
that.
okay, I'll be here Thursday, and then next Thursday, no, that whole next week that I got family. So thank
Okay.
you, Richard.
So
Thanks, Bridget.
this
Thank you.
program
Enjoy your family, Elizabeth.
this program on the 8th and Thursdays on the 15th.
Actually, the program that now is going to be on the 15th,
No,
this
no,
one, Bridget and
I'm
I.
sorry, you broke up. Say that again.
Yeah, so the one that we just recorded now, you're going to run this one, the Bridget and my interview on the 15th.
Correct.
The one that we're recording on the 7th, you're going to run on the 8th.
You got it. We're all set
All
then.
right.
See you
All
then.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Blessings all.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Move this over, close this.